Hello folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel Learn to Code by Saurav. Today in this video I'm going to show you how to work with GraphQL using a Spring Boot application. So, so as part of this video, I'm going to use my existing Spring Boot application which I've already developed in this previous series. So if you guys haven't watched that video, I recommend to watch that video first before coming to this tutorial. Link is in the description below. Now let's start with the video. Let's first start with what is GraphQL and what is the use of it. So GraphQL is an open source data query and manipulation language for APIs. It was internally developed by Facebook in 2012 and publicly released in 2015. So as the definition says, it is a data query and manipulation language. So what is the meaning of it? Data query and manipulation language means for APIs like let's compare it with the REST API. So in REST API, if we go to the controller, REST controller, which is a user controller. So let's suppose we want to fetch all users, all existing users. So what we will get in the client, what we will get in the response, we will get all the attributes as part of this user object, like ID, first name, last name, email, and phone number. But in the case of GraphQL, we can query it out. Like when we call a GraphQL API, we can say like we want only first name from the response or last name from the response or just email and phone number from the response or just an ID. So basically we can filter it out. We have a control on the API filtration, like which data exactly we want instead of getting the whole data. Let's suppose this attribute, sorry, let's say this class contains hundreds of attributes. So in case of REST API, we will get all the attributes at the same. So in that case, we will get all the attributes in the response at once. We cannot filter it out there. But in the case of GraphQL, we can filter out and we can mention in the request like which attributes exactly we want in the response, and those attributes only will come in the response. That's what the main advantage of GraphQL is. So you will get more understanding on it as we go on further in this video. So let's start with the implementation without wasting any time. So first of all, we will add GraphQL dependency in the POM file. So I've already kept that dependency in my notepad. Let me just copy paste this dependency. This dep so this dependency you can get it from the Maven repo as well. You can get the latest version if you want. I'm using this version. Now, just like REST controller, we create controller package. We will create a GraphQL package. So I've already created a GraphQL package here. So in this GraphQL package, we will create one class called user data fetcher. So in REST terminology, we call our controller class as a user controller for user. Like if we are working with student management system, so we will call it student controller. So just like REST API, we will create another GraphQL API, and that API will be known as, the terminology will be known as fetcher instead of controller. Let's create one class, Java class, user data fetcher. If it is REST API, we will call it user controller. If it is GraphQL API, then we will call it data fetcher. Use data fetcher. So in REST controller, we mark our controller class to create a REST API, which is with the annotation REST controller. But in data fetcher, we will mark this API as DGS component. So this will become our data fetcher API, user data fetcher API, and also similar to REST controller, we can create our endpoints, various endpoints to get data, to delete data, to update resource, to get all to retrieve all the resource from the database. So like REST API, we can create endpoints here also. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to retrieve all the users available in the database using data fetcher API. Okay, and in the next video, I will show you how to update or how to insert data using the GraphQL API. So let's start writing endpoint for retrieve all the user. So public list of user, fetch all user, or you can just say users. Import this class list. Also we have to import. So to make this as data fetcher endpoint, we will mark it as DGS data, or we can also alternatively there is another notation for querying the data is called DGS query. But for now we will work with DGS data. The parent type will be query and field will be users. And there are two types of parent type. One is query and one is mutation. Query is for retrieving the data from the API, and mutation is to manipulating the data into the API, like create, post, put, delete, patch. For this kind of operation, we will use mutation, but for retrieving the data, we will use query. Return user. Let me inject user service. Not right. User service dot fetch all users, and this is it. Our data fetcher API is ready with the endpoint to fetch all the users from the database. Now we have to do one more thing. In the resource folder, we have to create one package. We have our folder schema, and inside this schema folder, we have to create one file, schema file actually. So we are working with user data. So we'll create user dot GraphQL S. This is the extension GraphQL S. Here we have to write what type of data we are going to request and what type of get data we are going to get in the response, and what query we are going to perform, like it is a query or it is a mutation operation. Those things we have to define here. So I've already defined it and kept it in notepad. Let me just copy that and paste here in the GraphQL schema file. This is not required as of now. These two things are required, type query and type user. So this means when when we request from the Postman or any other tool, so we have to pass this query in the request and users data, what data we have to get, right? So this query and this user will decide which endpoint to be run. So let me show you. I've already created one query for this fetch all user endpoint. This is the query. So in the GraphQL, it doesn't matter what request type you are getting, what request type you are passing. By default, it will be post. Doesn't matter what it is. So we just have to provide the location of the application and the GraphQL, and we have to pass the query. So in the query, we will pass this query. This means this is referring to this schema file and this type, and this user referring to this user. So when we request this GraphQL, it will search two things in the schema file. When it if it is matched, then it will fetch those results. If it is matched, then it will redirect the request to this data fetcher query and users. Here it will here this query and users will be matched with this schema, and all the data will be returned. Whatever the data is requested in the request. So here we are requesting all the attributes: ID, first name, last name, email, and phone number. So let me just start the application. I think we are good to test this GraphQL API. Now let's start this application. We got error. Okay, and the database is not up. Let me start the database. So I'm running MySQL database in Docker. Docker start this part. I think it will start now. Yeah, application has been started on port number 8080. Now let's check if this API is working or not. Yeah, this API is working. We're getting data, all the users from the database. So as I've already told you, GraphQL is a data query and manipulation language. So in this video, we are going to query the data as we want. In the next video, we will going to mutate the API, like how we can create, how we can delete, how we can update the API data. So let's suppose I want only first name from this from this request. Let's delete all the attribute. ID also. We want only first name of all the users. So let's hit again. We're getting only first name. We want, let's say we want ID and first name of all the users. Let's hit again. We will get ID and first name. This is how the GraphQL works. This is the main advantage of GraphQL. We can get whatever the data we want from the backend instead of getting entire attributes at once. So this is it for now. Let me summarize the steps what we have done. So we have created this query. We have added one dependency in POM file, which is this one. You can get this dependency from my own repository. You can get the latest version if you want. We created one schema folder in a under resources folder and created user.graphqls file and mentioned this schema definition. We created GraphQL package inside the src directory and created GraphQL API named user data fetcher. So this is the terminology we are going to use as part of GraphQL API development. And we have created one endpoint to fetch all the users from the database. To make the GraphQL API, we have to mark the class as DGS component, and to make the endpoint, to make the method as endpoint, we have to mark this. We have to mark that method as DGS data. This is it for now. I hope you like this video. So if you find this video helpful, please do like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.